Today we're going to be looking at big trees, and I realize that a lot of people look at their yard and go, should I have a big tree? What's the value of a big tree? But it's amazing what a big tree can do for your landscape, how it can provide proportion, scale, shade, just that relaxing green environment that will make your home worth so much more money. So when you look at the value of putting a tree into your yard, it's not just the tree, but it's how it enhances the entire landscape. So today we'll be looking at, we'll be actually in the ground, in the holes of a few of these trees, and just seeing how big they really can be when you look at them and what it takes to move them around and the true value of them. So join us today, walk with us, come with us, and as we talk to the crew at Halka Nurseries and what goes into production of some of these large trees.
Hi, this is Steve Wagner. I'm Vice President of the New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association, and we're happy today to be visiting Halka Nurseries, New Jersey's premier grower and wholesaler of larger trees and shrubs for the nursery industry. And with us today is one of the owners, Kate Halka. And she will give you a little bit of background on what the nursery produces and why maybe it might be perceived that trees cost a little more than people think they should. So, Kate, good to be here today.
Hi, thank you for having me. So again, I know he introduced me. My name is Kate Poston. I am third generation at Halka Nurseries, along with my sister, Jamie Gaunt. I wish she could be here today. So we feel honored to be here and speaking with you guys.
So Kate, tell us a little bit about production at the nursery and what goes into producing a top quality tree for the homeowner or the landscape contractor.
So we grow, we get our trees as liners, as baby trees, for out in Oregon. That's where we've been buying our trees since my grandfather. And we plant them at 1-inch caliper. And even at that, they're not sellable for at least 3 years because there are a lot goes into it. Just planting the trees, getting them to root into the ground, pruning, fertilizing. There's a lot that goes into it in just the initial stages before we're even able to sell them to the public. We've just recently, we've always specialized in large trees. That's what we've been known for. But we also sell as small as 2.5-inch caliper. But even that's 3 years out before we're even able to sell it. And every year it's a lot of maintenance that goes into providing a good, solid, quality tree. So it's very involved. I know that sometimes it seems costly to purchase a tree that might not seem so large, a 2.5-inch, but when you factor in the real estate alone, it's a long time.
So tell us, what kind of a mix of trees are you growing here at Halka's, like such as your flowering trees, your shade trees, and those things?
So we grow over 200 varieties of trees, evergreens, deciduous trees, shade trees, anything from a white pine to a spruce, cherries, crab apples, oaks and maples. We try to grow, it's hard to keep up with sometimes because of the market. You're trying to keep up with the market, but we grow everything. We try to grow different flower colors, different fall colors. So there is, like I said, over 200 varieties of trees.
Oh, sounds great. So anyway, when you go to buy a tree, please buy from a reputable garden center or landscape contractor, as Halka Nurseries is a wholesale to the trade nursery. And just a little tidbit for me, remember, if you're going to plant a tree, the best time was 20 or 40 years ago. The second best time is right now. Kate, tell us a little bit more about what goes into the actual production.
So it's we operate on 2,400 acres between our central and southern farm. So there's a lot of maintenance, and the maintenance is not just on the trees, but it's obviously on the farm itself also. But every year we prune our trees at least twice a year. And knowing what has to be pruned is just constant attention. Driving through the farms and seeing, when you're buying a shade tree, for instance, everybody wants something with a central leader. So it's driving through fields and seeing what needs to be worked on. It's the canopy, our shade trees, we prune everything to 6 feet because at a minimum, because shade tree, a lot of them are going to parks and along sidewalks in the city. So a minimum of 6 feet is normally...
so people can walk under them.
So people can walk under them. So that's pretty important. It's also the fertilizing. They need to be fertilized every year at the right time. And we have a herbicide program to manage the fields. So there's a lot that's involved, even something as little as, when our mowers go through the fields, they make their mistakes. So it's going through the fields and seeing, well, what trees are no good anymore because the trunks have been hit by mowers or any kind of machines. So it's constant attention to the fields and driving through and seeing. So it requires a lot. And also, if we have a storm that comes through, that sets us back a lot. 2 years ago, I think there was a tornado that went through our southern farm. Took out so many trees. Fortunately, a lot of them were salvageable, but then some weren't. So then we had to spend, my father can probably talk more about that, we had to spend weeks just picking trees up. So the weather is not always in our favor. So it's constantly staying on top of that.
One really exciting thing I see here and that you could elaborate on is after your trips to Europe a couple years ago, you came back and you started production of trees that are pollarded, that are paneled, that are pleached. Could you elaborate on what that is?
Yeah, so speaking to the market, it's always hard. It's like clothes. You never know. It's hard to predict what's going to be in next year. But from visiting with nurseries in Europe, pollarded trees, pleached trees, which is a boxed tree. So we came back and we decided that maybe we should try this. And it took off. There's so many different styles. It's for modern gardens, and because we do a lot of work north of us. So modern gardens are very popular. So the pleached look is very popular. There's always different ways to grow, and a lot of the times we're just taking a chance. We don't even know if they're going to sell, but you want to try and stay ahead of the market. You can stay current and you can grow things now, but because we have trees that stay on our farm for so many years, we have to try and predict what might be popular in years to come.
Awesome. Well, I can say to the public out there, if you want something uniquely different for your landscape, have your contractor contact Halka Nurseries to buy and install for you these amazing pleached, pollarded, paneled trees.
So, Bruce Crawford here with Growing Green, and this afternoon we're talking with Chet Halka, and this is a nursery that I have wanted to come here for years and years and years, and so for me today to be interviewing and talking with Chet is actually a dream come true for me, because he doesn't know that, but it was just one of those places that you always want to go because they have the most fantastic trees. So, but I don't really know the history of Halka Nursery, so Chet, if you could talk a little bit about, did you begin this? Was this, did you inherit it? How did it all come about?
No, it started with my father. He started, say, 1942 when he was working on the Jefferson Memorial. They used to collect the trees out of the swamps of Ithaca, New York, the American elms that went down there. So at that time, he was working for Hunter and Higgins, another company. And then, of course, there was Pearl Harbor, and then World War II, and he went into service. Then he came out, and then in 1954 is when he actually started the business. But all of that, even in 1954, everything was collected out of the wild. It was no nurseries were growing big trees. So they covered all of the East Coast, finding fields where they could collect out of the wild. And that's basically how they started with big trees. It was more big trees than small trees at that time.
Okay.
And there was no equipment, so everything was done by rigging, skids, rollers, and all. But that's pretty much how it started, and then little by little we bought land and we started actual nursery. So collecting them was the beginning.
Okay. Actually, I never knew that. That's fascinating. And what defines a big tree? What is it? Do you measure it by the height of the tree, which I would assume that's a sort of a guarantee, but how else do you measure a large tree?
Well, evergreens we usually sell by height. Deciduous trees or shade trees, they're measured by caliper, which basically you measure the circumference, which is divided and gives you the diameter of the trunk.
Okay.
So the diameter, where it's 2 inch, 3 inch, 10 inch, we're measuring the circumference, but the measuring tapes we have actually do the calculations to give you the diameter.
Okay. Okay. So that's cool. And I would think that going into the wild to dig a tree, that seems to me a lot of work, because you have to get through the forest to get to the tree and so on and so forth. So from a historical standpoint, I think that's really quite neat how we've come from 1950 to 2020 and how we're looking at growing trees. So it's you do a lot of hand digging, I notice. So they're not so much machine dug; they're actually works of art. And could you talk a little bit about, because when people go into a nursery, sometimes they'll look at a tree that will be in a container, or it might be in a metal cage, or it might have sessile twine around it as a drum lace. And what are some of the advantages of drum lacing versus some of the...
Well, drum lacing, we've done that from the beginning. You can actually lace them 1 time, 2 times, 4 times, 5 times, depending on the soil. So the sandier the soil, the more laces, because as you're cutting it in, you keep lacing it so it doesn't fall apart. And we would continue to do that, other than labor became the problem. So now we don't have enough labor, can't get enough labor to drum lace everything. So we're only drum lacing the larger trees that we don't have tree spades for, but all the smaller trees are now tree spaded just because of the labor problem.
Okay. And I also noticed that you had some containers that were above ground, sort of a plastic mesh around them. And I was told that was a way to sort of prune the roots, so to speak.
Yeah, air pots. I've noticed it on websites for nurseries in Europe for 20 years. In this country, I mean, we buy container plants as liners as well. And the problem with a container plant, they call it a slick wall pot, is once the roots hit it, it goes in circles. So you can't keep them. Everything in a container has a shelf life. So their shelf life is limited. And if they leave them in there too long, you end up with poor root structure. Next thing, you have girdling roots, and then arborists on job sites pick them apart. So we went, my 2 daughters and the 2 farm managers and I went to Europe about 4 years ago to see this air pot, which is basically pots with holes in it. So when the roots hit the edge, the air actually kills the end of the root, and then they just fiber out inside. There's no circling. So it develops a better root system inside. It's basically, if you went to Home Depot and bought a plant and took it home, it's the same thing. You're not disturbing it. When we dig a tree out in the field, we're probably cutting 2/3 of the roots off.
That's true.
To dig it. So if you got to move something in the summer, there's no stress on it. You know, doing rooftops when the cranes cost an unbelievable amount of money, they want to almost be guaranteed that it's going to survive. So the air pot system, it is an added cost, but it does give you a better chance of survival.
So, you mentioned girdling roots, and so sometimes when you look at a tree, you notice that the root is actually wrapping around the tree. It actually chokes the tree, and so that's what a girdling root is. So good nurseries will take a lot of effort to actually prevent that from happening. So I thank you. This has been very informative, and I'm really, again, pleased and honored to be here today. So thank you so very much for having us.
My pleasure.
When I was walking around the fields, one of the things that really struck me were the size of not only the size of the plants, but also the size of the balls that were going with these plants. And there was some very large equipment out there to get the ball actually out of the hole and onto a trailer so that it could, obviously get delivered. What do some of these balls actually weigh? I mean, obviously you can't pick them up by hand. Some of them are 6 feet in diameter. So just sort of give us a little background on what that would entail.
Well, you could be an 8-foot root ball is probably roughly 12,000 pounds. 11 foot, we could be up around 36,000 pounds.
Ooh, goodness.
So it takes a lot of weight to be able to pick it up. And then the problem is not only picking it up, but then you have that big machine in the field. The busiest time of our year is spring when it's the wettest time. So getting through the fields with it. But yeah, the weight is usually the issue. Even small trees, we have a list of what everything weighs, but you see them alongside the road and you'll see where people tried to drag them out at night and they thought they were going to put them in their car and they're right by the road because they never got past that.
So, yeah, no, I mean, it's another good reason why you need a good landscape contractor to work with the nursery, with you, because obviously you will ship it, you'll get it to the site or to the nursery, but then to get it off the truck and into the yard requires a lot of heavy equipment and a lot of skill. It's not just putting a small pot in the ground. So, and it's, I know this is not, particularly your area of doing day-to-day work, but what are some of the follow-up care that people need to do if they get say an 8-inch caliper tree?
Well, that's the thing is, I tell clients that come here without a contractor, you don't want to pay somebody to learn. So if it's an 8-foot ball, 6-foot ball, 10, whatever it is, you want to make sure they've done this before, so that they're not learning because you're paying them. And then it's the same thing. Probably too much water is the single biggest killer of a tree.
Yeah.
They put them in poor drainage, dig a hole, fill it in. Well, that hole is just a bowl that collects all the water, even though it's got dirt in it, and it rots the roots and it dies. So drainage is the number one thing. And then after that, of course, it's going to depend on the summer, how hot it is, how much it gets watered. But that's why you need a landscape contractor that knows what he's doing right from the beginning, that he knows the drainage is good, he knows how much water it needs. It's they don't call us after that because once we sell the tree, we're done.
They're gone, right? So, yeah, and I've seen some jobs where they actually have to put in drainage pipes because they know once they dig the hole, it's going to be like a small pond, and so they need to get the water out. So yeah, it's a major accomplishment from one end to the other. But again, thank you for having us today, and I really appreciate this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, I'm standing here with Kate, and we're right next to one of their prize balls. And I look at this as one of the most impressive things because I've actually did a little bit of digging and I know the effort that goes into this. So if you could just explain a little bit about what is the process of digging these balls and how it works, why we're such a big hole, and what they did to get to this stage.
So we have, on a tree this size, we'll have a backhoe come in, and the backhoe will dig on two sides. That allows the guy to get into the hole. So then he's able to get into the hole, and then everything else is done with a spade. And we start with you have the burlap and the twine. So this is the first lace. They'll put the burlap down and they'll start with the first lace with the twine. And then they'll put the burlap down again, it's flipped up, and they'll flip it back over and they'll do the second lace. And then the third lace is down here. Obviously that can vary a little bit depending on the size of the tree. Now this is being done while the tree's standing up. The whole top and the sides are being done while it's standing up. Then after that's finished, we have a machine that'll come. If it's small enough, they can pull the tree over by hand. But if it's too big, we come with a machine. They tip the tree like it is now, and then they're able to finish the burlap and twine on the bottom.
So, and one of the things that obviously when this first goes on, it's relatively slack, and when they bring this string up, it goes around the top of the trunk and then back down and up, and each time they do that, it actually cinches it up a little bit more, and it makes it a tougher, tighter band. So
yes, and the guys that do this have been doing this we have some guys that have been with us for 35 years.
Wow.
And it really is a work of art.
It is.
They even make their own little tools, the wooden tools that help to cinch it and tighten the twine. So it's neat to watch.
Sure. And it's interesting too how, most of your roots, I would suspect, are in the upper portion of the tree.
Yes.
And that's why it's broader at the top and it gets narrower as you go to the bottom.
Yes, it does. That's one reason. And the other reason is to lay on the trailer. So the side that it's laying on right now is the flat side. because it needs, if the whole thing was round, it wouldn't stay still on a trailer. So we always have a flat side.
Cool.
So
Yeah, so it's something that they can't see in the camera right now, but on this side down at the bottom, it's actually flat. It's not round like
Yes.
this, so it won't roll off the trailer, I would assume, too. It helps with that.
yes, exactly.
That's an important detail.
It is, it is. And then even determining the flat side, you don't realize how much goes into this. You can't just pick a flat side. You have to, the flat side has to depend on the canopy. What's the flattest part of the canopy?
Oh,
You
okay.
obviously can't put a flat side where there's a big
Branch.
branch,
Yeah, okay.
because it can't lay on the bottom side of the trailer. So
I never knew that. That's,
Yes.
again, it's all the things that, you know, when they come out to dig, they actually look at the whole tree.
yes,
And then they adjust from there. And they might even adjust, too, based on the roots, where the roots are, and they might adjust their digging pattern a little
Yeah.
bit based on that.
Yes.
Anyway, just and how big is this tree? Just to give people an idea that, you know, obviously this tree is almost as big as I'm tall, so.
So this is a 6 to 7 inch caliper tree, and like we were talking about, the caliper is, we measure 12 inches up from the root flare, 6 to 7 inch caliper, nursery standards. So this root ball, I don't know the exact, but it's probably around 66 to 68 inches,
Okay.
which means that that's the width of the root ball. Depth-wise, it can be anywhere from 26 to 28 inches,
Okay.
or 24 possibly.
Okay. And you would say, again, a lot of people say, well, why do you start with such a big tree? But when you think about it, when you put this in the landscape, the value that it adds to your home is just tremendous, because suddenly a larger home suddenly becomes softened, and it really fits into the landscape so much better.
And it looks like it belongs there. It's been there forever.
Exactly.
And like a lot of our clients say, they don't have the time to wait. They don't want to wait for the trees to grow. They want instant gratification.
Yep. So this is great. So thank you so very much for
Thank you.
joining me in this hole.
Thank you.
What is it that, and Steve, you go out in the field all the time. You have spent your entire life from, I'm gathering, about 17 or 16 years of age working in the field and as a nursery professional. Well, when you're looking at a tree like this, what would you look for that say that this is a prime specimen and this will do well in the landscape for us?
Well, that's interesting, Bruce, because this particular cultivar of sugar maple, which we all envision being a tree with a very large round head for the beautiful orange and golden fall colors, this is a selection called Apollo, which has been found by a nursery person and then selected to grow. As you can see, it is in a very, very fastigiate form. Super tree for using in tight areas on the streets, and you still have that great fall color, but you have a head that will not impact electric wires and such as that. And then when you go to select a tree, whether it's this form or not, you want to have a tree with a good straight trunk. You want to have one that you could eventually have limbed up like this one to almost 6 feet so that you can walk under it. And if it doesn't have the most perfect straight trunk in the world, that doesn't make it a bad tree. You got to remember, trees are like people. You know, we have warts, we have imperfections. It's just part of life. But so don't discount a tree for that. But then also you want to make sure that when you buy that tree that it's got a nice root ball, or if it's in a container. Also, I suggest when you do buy a tree in a container that you ask to have the pot removed, take a look at the root system. If the root system looks like it is circling, doesn't necessarily mean you can't use that tree. It just means you have to do a little research, look up a YouTube video. You cut those roots dramatically, scary, I know, but that will give you a tree that will survive long term. You're looking at a tree that's going to last in your landscape hopefully 40, 50 years.
So good points, all very good tips. And sometimes too, you look at how the branches come off the tree. And if they come off at a 90-degree angle or up to a 45-degree angle, that's a good connection. If they're coming off at an angle tighter than that, then that could lead to problems down the road. So those are things, and this is a beautifully grown tree, so this you have no problems with. So thank you, Steve, for pointing those out. So before we mentioned air pots, And this is something that I haven't seen, and when Chet was talking about it, he was referring to the fact that he had seen it in Europe. So this came over from Europe, and as you can see, it has these dimples that come out, and the ends have been clipped off. So as the roots grow into these, obviously the air, and there's dry, and there's no moisture, so the roots actually die off at that point. That prevents the girdling, which we've been talking about. So if the roots hit the edge of a conventional pot, they'll often start to go around in a circle. And over time, as they get larger, they'll actually kill the tree, or at least really make it much less vigorous. Whereas when you have these holes, the roots don't wrap around, they just sort of end, and you get a lot of fiber production, and that's actually very beneficial for the plant. And obviously this is a relatively small diameter form, but the pots can come up to 16, 20, 50 inch, 60 inch, whatever. And so you can grow a large plant in a container like this. And the advantage of this is that you don't have to dig it, they're grown above the ground. So at any time of the year, sometimes in the middle of summer, you can't really dig a tree, but then this is ready for you to take to a job site and use it at any month of the given year. So anyway, just a very novel idea that I learned about today down at Halka Nurseries. Do the lichens harm the tree? And I actually had one person take a power washer and power wash all the trees in his property to get rid of these lichens. And these do not harm the tree. So they're actually an algal fungal relationship. They've been around for close to 300 plus million years. And they grow naturally on rocks, on trees, anywhere in nature. So they do not have roots that penetrate the tree at all. So they do absolutely no harm. And there's actually two different types here. I'm not proficient in the genus and species of lichens, but this one obviously has a nice orangey coloration to it, and this one's actually silvery and quite hairy, so it looks really cool. So again, when you have these, they really appreciate them as an ornamental value. Don't look at so much as a disease. And this is one of those things that you can then use at parties when we get back together again, and you can show people that these are actually good and they're actually not harming the tree. So that could be a quiz that you can give your guests. So in any case, here are the lichens. So my name is Bruce Crawford. I'm on the board of the NJNLA, New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association. I just would like to give a shout out to all the companies that are thinking about becoming a member of this great organization. Provides a lot of great benefits. If you love plants, you're going to be around a lot of people who love what you're interested in. They share, we communicate, we have great emails and other events. And just go to our website and see all the benefits of being a member of the NJNLA.